Street podcast.
Army Main Street Radio, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it, guy.
Do you guys just want to introduce yourselves and tell us why you?
Kendall, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
No, Connor, you take this one.
All right. Army Main Street Radio. This is a little bit of brainchild that I got started, but obviously can't do without a whole team, whole squad. But the idea here is that we want to be promoting essentially all the systemic issues affecting us as a society, try to identify the root problems of it, whether that lies in business, technology, politics, or culture, have a frank and honest discussion about it from every perspective, every angle, and try to really, really grapple with how can we as individuals do our part in fixing the system, and then what are the overall things that probably need to happen to change so that we're not as fucked in the future. Realistically, this is just two college-educated people trying to have a real-life discussion, even though this isn't our main job, about, what the fuck's going on. So, why me? I don't know. I've got an eclectic background. I'm very passionate about this stuff. I studied political science in undergrad. I'm very interested in, psychology. That's why I went into advertising, marketing, communications. That's kind of where I pigeonholed myself in political science. I used that as my segue entry point into technology, where I taught myself how to code, to program. I know that's something you can relate to, Kendall.
Yeah, absolutely.
You pick up skills on the fly to do what you need to do to keep moving forward. From there, I went and got my master's in applied data science and business analytics, and I had this crazy idea for a blockchain development. Of course, we need a lot of funding to make that happen, so we want to build essentially a crowd of people that support the initiative that we're trying to do, which is rebuild a digital infrastructure for the public good, so that we can empower people with the internet the way it was intended to be, as opposed to kind of like this clusterfuck of big tech companies we have today. And not to say anything against the people that work there. I worked at Google, this is nothing to scoff at. These are hardworking people that, were trying to make it in life and ended up at one of these jackpot companies. And, they kind of have a lot of predatory practices that I think that insulate their power at the top and really harm all the people at the bottom. And I think we got to showcase that and other ways that that's going on. And I feel like because I have a firsthand perspective on that I'm qualified to talk about it and want to showcase the other things that I'm interested in reading about. And I'm an avid reader too. I'm never just idly just doing nothing. I'm trying to pick up new knowledge, learn new things to broaden my perspective, my horizon, to understand why things are going on. And I just want to share that with people. So that's kind of why I feel qualified, but I just kind of sit around and create websites all day and see what sticks and try to sell marketing and ads to people. So I'm as much of yeah. I'm like one of those grubby salespeople, just with digital marketing online. So I'm also the worst of the worst, and so I feel like that whole full perspective, full angle, whatever, is why maybe my perspective's valid. But I don't know. That's why we're on a radio talk show. Chime in, let me know where I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'll boil it down pretty simply. Why us? Because we're not experts, but we're people willing to learn and listen and grow, just like you. And we're going to discuss issues probably from different viewpoints, which is great because we've lost the ability in our culture to do that without immediately jumping to this person has the worst intentions. So that's why us, because we're going to have the same conversations you have with your friends and with your family. And I think our approach will be one of civility, and coming from a place of good intent and growth. And hopefully you all will follow us on that journey yourself. So if you find yourself wanting to speak on a topic like climate change, and you are only working off of your own experiences and your base assumptions, hopefully what we're going to show you is how to take in other perspectives so that you're not just working off of your instincts and assumptions, but instead are coming at topics from a more educated and rational place. That's why us.
And Kendall always being the voice of reason. I just have to chime in, like, the psychology behind essentially what we're talking about is probably one of the most fascinating things in general. In psychology, it's called heuristic biases. But basically, the way humans have evolved is to work on quick reference points, essentially, to help them automate decision making, because our brains can only process so much information at once. And so we just need to make decisions to move forward with our lives, with our day. And these shortcuts that our brain is, inherently benefited us from taking, oftentimes are the reason for a lot of the systemic issues we face, because we don't even recognize that sometimes these little tricks that we've developed to make our life more easy and like manageable to live also fuck the people on the other side of that.
Right. And so kind of speaking of evolution, the evolution of humanity has caused our planet a lot of, I won't call it pain and suffering, but we've been messing with forces that took, give or take a couple billion years to come to fruition. So you were reading a book that you wanted to bring up today. Right?
Yeah. So, I'm not the one with any sort of climate understanding background or any sort of, in relationship, I guess, with sustainability or like whatever. But it's something I want to learn more about, obviously, because climate change is something that's affecting all of us, and it's a really immediate threat.
Wait. I thought climate change wasn't real.
Yeah, I mean, sure, climate change isn't real. I mean, global warming isn't real, but that's because it's a terrible term.
Yeah,
Market your shit better, guys.
What's the difference?
So the difference is, global warming is the idea that, the planet's just getting hotter. And overall, that is kind of what's happening. That's the trend.
Yep.
At the same time, because what global climate change really is radical changes in the shifts of weather.
Yep.
You get a lot of really cold days and freak things that happen, like snow and freezing ice in Texas a couple weeks ago, and people are like, "Ha! Global warming, my ass."
So,
and it's just a marketing term.
So the thing is yes, the trend is that the Earth is warming, right? It is technically a natural process that would occur over millions of years. There's plenty of records of that. The thing that we have done is we have used energy in such a way that we release a gas into the atmosphere and it traps heat. Now, what Connor said is really important to understand. And I'm just going to drop a fact that always kind of mystifies people, but I'll tie it in. So the Amazon rainforest, right, is a forest where there's tons of diversity, tons of animals, tons of plants, not a lot of nutrients in the soil, not very fertile at all. So how do you get plants if the soil isn't fertile? Well, dust blown from the Sahara Desert across an ocean fertilizes the Amazon River. Now, that's important because those wind patterns, right? The Earth heats, those wind patterns change. You end up with ice in Texas, right? You end up with more hurricanes. And the thing about it is we do have a lot of modeling. We have a lot of smart people working on it, but we just don't know how this warming will continue to affect all these systems. So I brought this up just to say that everything on our planet, these natural systems are deeply interconnected. It's what I spent, all of undergrad studying and thinking about. So, just come at it from a place of everything is interconnected. Even the things that you don't think are interconnected, I promise you, are.
And I love that you say that, Kendall, because obviously that's like the thing that I harp on the most is, everything is about context, right? And the only way that we can have context on the situation is if we start tracking and unifying a lot of this data so that we can understand the relationship between the temperatures in the Sahara and what's going on over there to the Amazon rainforest. And then I forgot what documentary I was watching, but like obviously the Amazon rainforest, like, oh, it's in South America. It's so far away from America, right?
Right.
Yet, just like you were talking about the global wind patterns, there's essentially a river in the sky, an Amazon in the sky that carries the forest moisture all the way up to the United States to water and fertilize a lot of our nutrients, our plants up here in the United States. And the fact that like we're so dependent on the Amazon, yet we have no recollection for that, or no recognition for it, I guess.
Right. And I think that's just because, it's kind of hard to understand. It's hard to take in, and I think we have to do a better job of teaching that earlier on, right? Like, you show up at college and then all of a sudden, if you're me, you're studying environmental science and you learn things like, oh, hey, there are these wind currents called Hadley cells, right? And they bring warm air up from the south to the north, right? It makes it so that places like the UK are habitable. You start learning those things and you're like, oh, okay. All right. I see now why I should take this seriously. Like, not to freak out anybody, but it's something that, like, okay, if the earth is interconnected, we're all here together. Every organism, inorganic thing, right? Like, we're all working in tandem to a certain extent. So I still want to, let's dive into the book. What book did you read and what did you want to bring up about it? Like, what'd you learn?
Yeah, so I recently finished Elizabeth Colbert. Forgive me for pronouncing that wrong. I'm not really sure. I didn't look into it. But The Nature of the Future. This is one of her latest novels, or like a latest update revision to the novel, given light of the global pandemic and everything that's going on recently. But anyways, she gets very much to the point of which you were making earlier, in that the interconnectedness of all these systems. And a lot of what she talks about is what she calls the Anthropocene era, which is essentially, prior to the last 10,000 years, let's say, the Earth has existed in a natural state where it is essentially acting as its own organism, maintaining homeostasis just like the body does. And yes, there's fluctuations in temperature that, are very radical, especially 10,000 years ago, which is really interesting if we look at biblical myths about floods and stuff. But we can talk about that later. The book itself, though, is talking more so of how essentially nothing we do anymore is natural. Everything is a result of something that we've already done in the past, and that our Band-Aid patchwork solution approaches to solving the modern day, like, heads of these problems are going to cause new problems for us down the road in the future, because we're messing with systems that we refuse to fully understand and just try to change the immediate problems that are affecting us. So one of the examples that she uses that I really liked is kind of fighting against the existence of cities along the coast, like New Orleans in particular, and how essentially the reason why New Orleans as a state or a piece of land even existed was because the flooding of the delta the tributaries brought so much sediment from upper in the northern United States down to New Orleans, and that the floods that they have actually are what was creating the land, because the land is always sinking and the moss is so full of moisture that's why the landmass is even there. But as it compacts, if you don't have floods spreading more sediment, things continue to sink further and further below the sea level. And essentially, all these cities and towns, New Orleans included, sit in these bowls propped up by levees that the moment they break or water bursts over, everyone's sitting in 4 feet of water. And yet we continually try to engineer our way past, the environmental inevitability that, having the city of New Orleans in general is probably not sustainable for the long run. How do you keep something that's 8 feet under sea level
Right.
dry for
Right.
people?
Well, you just keep pumping out more water.
Basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that is exactly what we do. And so it's an interesting thing this book brings up because there are plenty of examples of it, right? Take fire season in California now. People refuse to leave a place that will, as time goes on, have sustained massive wildfires. And I think it's important that we contextualize the discussion in the sense that no matter what we do with climate change, the planet will warm, like we just talked about, and there will have to be technological advances to keep our weather stable enough, right, for human societies to do what we've been doing now for give or take several thousand years, right? Because before, the weather sucked. So you moved around a lot, right? You were a nomad. You were following the seasons. You were following your food sources. Mm-hmm. So what we have done is we've changed through our own actions, mostly out of ignorance. We didn't really know about this until the 1960s. We've changed these patterns, and now I feel like we're refusing to.
Maddie,
Not really sure how to fix it.
just leave the room quietly.
I know. This is
Walk out in
I
shame.
grew up in Nebraska, and it's 10 years back from technology. Sorry. Technical difficulties.
Audience members causing problems already.
Yeah.
I'm not going to touch my phone anymore.
But yeah, no, it's just that we're used to this stable weather, and now we're going to have to bet on ourselves, just the human race, and say, okay, we got to get technology right to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. Already exists.
Mm-hmm. Carbon capture technology.
Exactly.
What you're talking about.
Exactly.
She talks about it in the book as well. One of the interesting, more controversial things that she brings up in terms of this climate engineering is the idea that we can throw diamond dust up into, I think it's the stratosphere, and reflect the sun back out in the earth and essentially cool it off. But the controversial take on this, or like part of this, is that we will become dependent on putting more and more diamonds in the air as we continue to pollute the earth, such that eventually when we give up on it, we'll have like an accelerated global warming that just basically fries us all because we won't solve the underlying problem.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on that? Like, is there benefit in pursuing something like that as a short-term Band-Aid to buy us more time? Or do we continue to see people, like, essentially not invest in the systems they need to because this enables status quo yet again?
So that's how she named the book, Under a White Sky.
Oh.
Go ahead and proceed, though, Kendall.
No.
I didn't even realize there was more to the title.
The name of the book was Under a White Sky.
Yeah, so the title is Under a White Sky, The Nature of the Future. I only read the bottom half because that's all I could see on my laptop.
And the audience saving our butts.
I don't do well with titles or descriptions or names or stuff.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
We will have to use technology to a certain extent. But we can't continue to consume the way we do with the amount of people on the planet and expect that things will be, nice and dandy. Now, I guess going back to the example of, like building levees around New Orleans, or there's policies in place in California where insurance companies are forced to insure houses in fire areas.
That seems like counterintuitive for an insurance policy to insure.
It is. But I think what these are short-term stopgaps, because whether we like it or not, this is coming. And I would argue at the federal level of our government, we now have an administration that acknowledges the problem. Is there going to be the political will, the political capital to move as fast as we probably need to? No. I do believe we probably need to be carbon neutral by 2030, right? We need to
absolutely
invest hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in carbon capture, in reforestation efforts, all these different things. But my perspective is we have to balance two things. We have to do the most amount of good for the most amount of people right now, which is building levees around New Orleans, making sure that we got systems to pump water out as fast as it's coming in, to ensure people whose homes are in, who am I to tell somebody, my grandfather's owned this ranch for, however long, and now I got to leave because it's in a fire alley. But it's a stopgap to get us to these actual solutions.
But at the same time, it encourages people not to make change and to stay right there where the fire continues to want to burn. And at the same time, like, I understand, like, it's wrong to put essentially the loss on the consumers here because this is the way the culture is structured, right?
Right.
But why would the federal government keep giving money away or, like, keep forcing the insurance companies to give the money away for this instead of trying to, like, pay people to leave their homes and relocate?
Right.
Because realistically, that's more sustainable.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I think that's the policy prescription for that particular example.
Yeah, that's completely politically unpalatable. Would you also say that?
How does this impact different generations and having those conversations? Age perspective. Just like, because asking like some 30-something-year-old to relocate versus, someone that's in their 70s and like had entirely different like politics, government, people impacting them like from a media level.
My quick gut take on something like that. So Rachel asked, whether like the generational like perspectives or the generational like wealth status of these individuals influences how they respond to the idea that they need to leave their homes, right? And for the people who are older who own their homes, right? Like, I think, boom, cash out. You're probably up a fuck ton since you bought the house because housing markets appreciate.
Right.
Yes, we had the 08 recession and like the 11 little dip or whatever. And right now there's 11 million people sitting in this housing crisis that Biden's just kind of pushing off right now for the moment. But like, cash out of your house, liquidate that asset, use it to buy cheaper property in states that, essentially have that. And I know that's a privileged take to have because many people are not in that situation, right? At the same time, start that. So I think that's much easier for someone who's older, though because of their politics, they probably don't believe it, see it, or want to do that. And, so they're going to stagnate there and whatever, and their wealth disappears, but they're probably also going to disappear when their wealth does. So it doesn't matter for the young person buying in, this is a tough question. Like, I don't know.
I gotta. Have you guys seen Midsummer? I think that.
Yeah, Midsommar. Yeah, fuck you, Chad.
I think that's our solution to the generation gap and overpopulation.
75, you're
Good
done.
grief.
Solves
Oh,
everything
man.
at
Good
once.
God,
grief.
that's morbid.
My
That is
98-year-old
morbid.
grandma would be so disappointed in that.
Yeah, I appreciate the very unhelpful take over there. But going back to someone who might actually have a
Very
reasonable opinion.
So it's a tough question in the sense that take our current president, who's 80 years old. Mm-hmm. If we say coming of age is between the ages of 25 and 45, let's say till middle age, you grew up in a completely different time period with a completely different set of paradigms. And the reason I bring this up is because that informs your decisions, right? Mm-hmm. I was having a discussion with my dad. My dad goes, your generation is the most selfish generation that has ever existed. He's 60, right?
And yet here we are trying to solve problems for everyone else.
Right. And what we talked about, I said that the thing that you are missing is the amount of fear that so many of us carry in the sense that, like, well, when are you having kids? I would prefer not to have children if, there's going to be freak storms every month. I just would prefer not to. And my dad's reply, oh, if we worried about that, think about the Depression, think about World War II. I said, yeah, all of that is valid. The problem is climate change is an existential threat.
We can't go in there with guns and shoot climate change down and take it over.
Right.
The land,
there's no way to handle it except with technology.
Half of life too. You're talking existential.
Exactly. And for him, he's in the back, back third of his life. And so he doesn't have to see it the way that we see it as people who are growing up during this time. And so it is, I would say, harder for folks who are older or folks who are more sort of conservative. I want to live in the town that I grew up in. Why should I have to leave? And I think we have to be empathetic to that. But at the same time, as a policy prescription, I'm just going to say, look, if you live in California, buy a house in Michigan. It's going to be a great place to live. Buy a house. I actually was reading an article. I was reading an article. Yeah, that's true. The gray. But I was reading an article about the best places to kind of hunker down, over the next 50 to 100 years. Like, where would you want to settle your family?
Bunker style.
One of the...
Omaha is where the president's supposed to go, so...
See?
That sounds awful. I love Nebraska. It's way cooler than I thought it was. And I'll shout out Lincoln. But no, give me a body of water. I don't want to be the most landlocked fucking state in the country.
We have the Oklahoma aquifer.
We got man-made
What?
lakes.
Some sort of aquifer is apparently their claim to fame for water.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the Missouri/Mississippi River? I think it's the Missouri River.
Rivers are cool.
Part of the Mississippi.
Rivers are cool. I won't shit on rivers.
Runs through Nebraska.
South Dakota.
Our border.
There's a cool place up in Fort Randall, right on one of the tributaries. Very cool up there. Very open. That being said, I interrupted you, Kendall.
No, you're good. The one of the best places to hunker down with climate change are places with lots of lakes, because lakes have water holds its heat a lot better than air does. So they have a warming effect on the surrounding,
That seems so counterintuitive to my springtime jumps into the lakes. And I'm shivering.
Yeah.
But I know you're right. I know the science.
So in that case, I think from a policy perspective, it's got to be a three-pronged approach at the federal. Now, we're talking way up here, right? Like, we're going to bring this down to some things that are actionable for the person. But way up here at the policy level, the prescriptions are, look, if I'm Joe Biden, and actually it's really funny because in this last bill they put through, Joe Manchin held up the floor. As far as I know, he didn't really get that much for West Virginia. If I'm the senator from West Virginia, a place that produced coal, and powered the country for a generation, I would have went, we're putting the climate change version of NASA in West Virginia, period, full stop. We need to be investing in the technologies that are going to help us mitigate the problem, whether that's putting aerosols in the atmosphere, carbon capture, any of that stuff. And we need to start to get people to say, okay, what is my personal carbon footprint and how do I take small steps to lower that?
And one second, Rachel, I want to come back to what you're saying, absolutely. But Kendall, I have a question here. So I absolutely agree that we all should be trying to reduce our carbon footprint, and there are definitely actions that we can take to reduce, obviously, our personal carbon footprint, and thus some of the corporations' carbon footprints that are so affected by consumerism of us buying and selling all the things that we want. But for me, someone who's a skeptic of big government, someone who doesn't necessarily think that federal politics or policy does anything truly impactful and that it's a lot more posturing and mismanagement of money, how do you convince someone like me to believe that the government should or could more effectively invest in climate change technologies? Now, I think that they should be, absolutely. The funding of our taxes should be going directly to people solving the problems. I want to make that very clear. But that's not how I see the way the government operates today. And I don't see policy enacted in a way that actually truly does that. I see a lot of kickbacks that go into projects that special interest groups have lobbied for, that they already have some sort of benefit pre-set up for them to invest in it, right? Some sort of hedge against it. Right. And sure, maybe the technology is promising, maybe not, but I think it's sold to the American people in a way that it is promising when there may be actually real, more promising technology out there that we're refusing to investigate. We're not funding, at least. So
you see, and that's actually an excellent question, because I don't think right now I could convince somebody that our government is effectively spending our money.
I don't know how you could.
It's. But here's what I would say. When America wanted to put a human being on the moon, we effectively spent our tax dollars to go put a human being on the moon, right? The problem is there has to be both. And right now, government and the market have to play in tandem, because this is essentially what's got to happen.
But they are playing in tandem. It's really hand in hand almost. But the people with the bigger hand or the better hand seems to be the corporations.
So here's what I'd say about that. There are plenty of startups, right? From I forget the name, but if you folks want to look it up, Bill Gates is in a startup for carbon capture, right? There are a few others, Bill, apparently, I was listening to, because he has a new book out, and I was listening to kind of like, interviews of him on his book tour, and he's like, yeah, I've talked to Jeff Bezos, we'll see how much we can get him to give. But the problem is, take cars. Cars is a perfect example. If everybody tomorrow drove an electric car, that's a third of the problem. And it still doesn't solve the manufacturing of that car, right?
Or the energy of the car, actually.
Exactly.
It solves the polluting of the car.
Exactly.
Like the immediate polluting, not the indirect.
But the thing is, we still have to get there. Right. And people don't like swift change. How do you get...
It's been my opinion they don't like change at all, regardless of how fast or slow it happens.
Right. How do you get people to change quickly? And that is where I would argue the federal government has a role to play in creating a better market. Now, I know this is going to be, radical to some, but you know how you get an electric car everywhere? Is you make really, really nice cars, and then you give people just enormous tax breaks to the point where it's like, oh, okay, it's cheaper to go get the new Mustang Mach-E than it is to go buy a gasoline-powered whatever, right?
But they already do it with Ford F-150s and anything that's heavy enough to be considered a tax.
Yeah, why do we incentivize heavy cars as a tax credit?
Yeah, but that's this goes to your point. This goes to your point of special interest. That's what it goes to. And so my thing is, I do not believe that it can be solely a private market-driven thing, because the problem is markets react to people, right?
Well, that's the way we've incentivized markets too. But,
true.
I have a problem with everything. So
change this though.
What?
Would transparency change this?
Yeah, potentially, but transparency is still a long way off.
Yeah.
It's something that we want to work for and promote, but and that's the basis of our blockchain company.
Right.
But obviously, like, blockchain's years away from adoption. What can we do today is really some of the questions we're trying to tackle.
The thing is if it's purely a market-driven thing, markets are going to react to what people want. And I can tell you, Americans love gigantic gas guzzling vehicles a lot.
Now, is that because of the tax incentive, or is it just because they love the image that it puts off?
I think they love the image it puts off. I think the tax incentive certainly helps, but we have to. It's weird because we're in a place where this problem is so prevalent, and it is a global problem, that we're going to have to thread the needle, so to speak, with both government and private industry. I think the government needs to create laws, which it has been doing. I mean, let's face it, the only reason car companies, besides Elon just wanting to be better than everybody, have started making electric vehicles is because our emission standards are getting so strict that it's like, all right.
But part of me doesn't think the emission standards have anything to do with it at all. It's just that Elon Musk went and created the market for electrical vehicles, promoted demand, basically high luxury premium goods, sold it to people as a luxury item, and convinced them that electric technology is the future and that this is a luxury that you want to be on. And now you see the OEMs and like all the big manufacturers reacting to that and trying to get in on that market. Sure, GM's come out with, obviously, with their decision to go all-electric vehicle.
Right.
I forget what the timeline is.
2025, they said they're going to compete with Elon. So.
And they can, because they have the scale to, and I'm glad that they're taking the initiative. I'm not upset about it.
Yeah.
But, he went out and created the market, and I don't think the government really had anything to do with it. They also saw where he was going and incentivized what he was already doing.
Here's where I would push back on that.
Okay.
If you're a giant corporation, right? I think, and folks can get mad at me for
it's a meme stock,
for butchering, the numbers, but electric cars make up a tiny percentage of the market. Because, like we just finished talking about, generationally, my father, when he gets into my car with modern safety features, is like, no, I'm out. Like, I don't want my car beeping at me constantly. This is ridiculous.
Well, what about the convenience of self-driving? Like, I have bumper assist, and it's so much fun.
Yeah, to you and I.
Yeah, but F-150 has a bumper assist. It's just definitely not environmentally friendly.
To us, maybe.
Yeah.
But to people who have driven a car, longer than we've been alive, because there are plenty of those people out there. Not interested. I want my gigantic pickup truck that I know how to drive. I know what it's going to feel like. I know what sounds it's going to make. I mean, I love watching car reviews, right?
Start it up.
And I love watching car reviews. And one of my favorite cars is a Porsche 911.
Yep. Beautiful car.
Beautiful. And it sounds amazing. It sounds like,
it's the German engineering.
Exactly, right? It sounds amazing. None of that in electric cars. We have to make goofy sounds, right, for electric cars.
I like when I turn mine on and I hear nothing until like 10 minutes later when the generator kicks on because the battery's been running too long. It does make a sound.
So my point is that I do not believe the legacy manufacturers would have gone to this, frankly, as quickly as they did. Now, GM came out swinging. That's a different deal. But I don't believe they would have gone as quickly as they did without just saying, all right, we're going to be forced to produce a gas vehicle that gets 60 miles to the gallon. And I still got to have it be a giant pickup truck or a giant body-on-frame like Escalade. Yeah, that's too much work. This is too much work. Let's just slap some batteries in it and make an electric Hummer.
Proactive culture, and I think that's the difference.
Say that again.
I said we're in a reactive culture, not a proactive culture.
Yes,
right.
That is true.
But Tesla's created this luxury market. I know it's fractionally small or whatever, but they proved that the demand there exists, and the amount of people that signed up to buy fucking digital or toy copy of the Cybertruck whatever kind of bullshit he puts out there, right? Like, that's the kind of fandom that's behind this. So if there's a mass market, cool, affordable, GM-presented electric vehicle, that should fly off the shelves, especially if Elon's like, you know what, this is for the good of the market. It drives up the value of Teslas anyways because we're the ultra premium. And more electric vehicles is good for us and good for everyone because now we can make it more accessible from a charging station standpoint and infrastructure like that.
I love how it doesn't come down to which one gets us out of the extinction event we're facing.
Right.
It comes down to which one makes the coolest noise.
Right?
Yeah. But
humans are very, very complex individuals when it comes to our taste making.
I think you bring up a great point, though. The reason, right, we have markets, we develop forms of government like democracy, we developed economic systems like capitalism,
right,
is because we are, in our nature, kind of short-term thinkers. I want something dope. I want the new, like, Porsche Taycan wagon because it looks dope and it goes fast, right?
Yep.
I don't care that in so doing I'm polluting less. So it's the market reacts to that, right? There are plenty of people who know, okay, this is an existential threat. And I would argue it's actually not an extinction event. Luckily, humans happen to be the most adaptable animal on the planet Earth. There will just be
invasive species.
There will just be less of us, unfortunately, as resources get scarce and things like that. So, how do we kind of we went down a rabbit hole a little bit, but
this was very good. I appreciate this because we can tackle this from the top-down approach, but now we can transition. What can we actually do? What's the bottom up here?
Right. What's the bottom up approach? So you talked like off when we were kind of getting started here. You talked about buying local, right? When we were off camera and not live. I really want to focus on that.
Yeah.
Because if you're conscious of your carbon footprint, but you still want to take vacations, you still want to drive your giant F-150, cool. Let's think about little things you can now do, right, to pollute less. And buying local, man, is one of the best ways. You're taking planes, you're taking trucks out of the equation, and really lowering your carbon footprint that way. So let's start there.
So I think my buying local isn't necessarily even just about produce or food or organics like that. Though I think that's the easiest way to get started is buying organic. Yeah, or not organic, buying local. Right. Organic, who knows if that's real or not? I mean, I don't have a problem with GMOs.
Yeah. We'll deal with that later.
It's
another
marketing
episode.
And advertising. Don't get it messed. But at the same time, right? Like, you're paying a premium for something that comes like maybe 20 miles away from you, and you know, not only is it necessarily just like close by, but it tastes better, it's healthier, it's some of the better food you've ever had because it's not pumped up full of all this other, you know, mass commercial production like stuff. But that's something I'm less familiar with. Where I actually was coming from when I was thinking about this, it is more from the perspective of source manufacturing and the idea that like stuff like 3D printing and you know, local CNC facilities could utilize open source blueprints of different designs and stuff, and essentially we can white label a bunch of products that, you know, are in high demand, like essentially what grocery stores do when they give you the option between the Kraft single slice or the Aldi, you know, brand single slice, right? It's cheaper, it's whatever, but instead of it being the grocery store's brand, you know, it could be like a t-shirt that your local artist created, and then we just printed it because we have t-shirts here and we just print on them, and you can get it the same day, same way that Amazon does, but it doesn't come across the country, it doesn't come, you know, overseas on a barge and all the other stuff we're talking about. Yeah, there's a story behind it. There's a lot more emotional attachment. There's some scarcity almost because a lot of the goods could just be locally promoted. Also, people you know, they're creative outlets. But where my mind actually got started rolling on stuff like this is I watched a documentary a few months back about the cosmetics industry, and basically they've created a source manufacturing facility, in California, where these chemists are mixing the powders basically as needed to sell lip kits or lipstick. I don't know. Makeup's not really my area of expertise, but that being said,
that's a lot of ways. Can't relate.
This is the white male perspective. Makeup's the straight white male, cisgender,
it's
whatever.
Not shampoo. It's shampoo and conditioner.
Right.
It's a lot of stuff. But essentially, what they were doing is like, all right, we're creating these brands on social media. We're promoting it. We're promoting scarcity. There's a limited quantity of these things, so we can plan our production and we can constantly be putting out something new for consumer culture to buy into.
Right.
But it's less harmful because it doesn't come overseas.
Right.
You can trust the chemist that made it because it's local, and it comes to you, in a much better fashion because you don't have surplus, you don't have excess, and that's one of the things that I feel like capitalism has failed to account for is the excess, the oversupply. And with all the data that we have in the information age, that seems like something that we could balance and could be very reasonable for us to achieve. And not saying that solves climate change or any of these issues.
Right.
It certainly goes probably the distance in making things more sustainable to not have so much waste.
Right. So I would say that is a small business, right? Business argument. Just to kind of level set for folks where
that's generally my perspective.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that if you are a small business owner and you can afford to source whatever it is locally, do it. Now, the problem is there aren't as many things manufactured right in the United States anymore. So that's a different issue. But I think this is how we get to that.
We can bring manufacturing back, but it has a new face.
Exactly. And then on the more personal level, what I always challenge people to do is take a thing, right, that's not really going to bother you that much and just cut it out.
I think your example was just like, I don't eat beef on Thursdays.
Yeah, it's just like,
specific.
Yep, I don't eat beef on Thursday. We know that beef production is very bad for the environment.
Because it contributes all the methane gases to the air that's contributing to all this.
And methane is much worse than carbon, right? So
I think that's something that's not talked about enough is how much worse methane is.
Right.
Basically farts.
Exactly.
Hold in your farts, guys.
Yeah, it really, and the sort of crops that we grow, right? Yeah, take a very specific thing. If you like to run to the grocery store all the time and get just kind of little things, I do. Mm-hmm. Okay, in the summer I'm gonna ride my bike. I got one bag, and it's light. Okay, I'll ride my bike. Cool.
And it's just nice because you get out and get some exercise too. It's not strenuous, it's enjoyable.
Exactly. It's not radically changing your life. It's just cutting out the fat, so to speak, of like, okay, where can I reasonably and sustainably, something that you can do over and over and over again consistently, do. I don't eat beef on Thursday. Cool. No, that's not going to like lower your carbon footprint as if you're one of the folks that are like, I'm never getting on a plane again. If that's you and you can make that work, go for it. If you can afford a Tesla, do it. Cool. But pick what you individually can do based on your life and your context and do it. Perfect example. And eventually, I think this is actually going kind of back to our kind of top-down topic, something that we're going to end up doing. If you're a farmer, right, and you've got 50 acres, and you're like, you know what, we make the bulk of our money, we use about 30 of this to make money, right? I don't know. Find out what plants you can plant in the other 20 that really, really, really like carbon dioxide. Plant them. Cool. It's carbon farming.
I think and I obviously haven't met that many farmers, but the last year or two, I've encountered more people that kind of are in that lifestyle.
Yeah,
But I think that they're already doing those things.
Yeah.
Especially like what are considered large farm production facilities are usually just kind of generational family farms that have outlasted the giant actual industrial farms that exist and whatever. But the importance of crop rotation to them, yes, it obviously helps carbon capture, but for them it's about keeping the soil nutritious so that they can grow the crops in general, and they have to rotate it around
anyway.
Because, for example, a crop like corn is so destructive to the soil that you can't even plant it there a few generations later because you have to rehabilitate the soil.
Which is why they use soybeans.
And so they use soybeans, but there's obviously other plants. But this only helps us with our food shortage issues because food insecurity is a very real thing, even in this country. But obviously at the same time we're juggling the dichotomy of food production and the environment, and we need the land for both.
Well, and that's where, look, if you haven't tried something like an Impossible Burger, so on your Thursday, when you usually eat a hamburger and you're like, look, I still kind of want that hamburger and I really don't care. Try an Impossible Whopper. You know what I mean? Like, there are, again, little things. Because the thing that is unfortunately just a fact is we raise so much cattle. There are statistics out there about like just the biomass of cattle on the earth is it's just disproportional to all these other animals that exist, right?
I think Elizabeth Kolber actually makes a really cool point in their book.
22 to 1 is like cattle, any sort of pet, and human is the ratio of 22 versus 1 to native species.
So essentially, like, humans outnumber most of the species on the planet, and then the domesticated animals on top of like our food and our pets.
Right.
We have no biodiversity left. We basically just eat what's here, or we hang out with it.
Again, the ultimate invasive species.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In the best way possible. We did it, guys. We really did it.
I think.
Got you mic'd up with how much you're commenting today.
Sorry. Jesus, you want me to?
No, I appreciate the fodder. I'm just saying it would have been nice to mic you up. Sorry, Kendall.
No. You're exactly right in that. Right, we've got this 22 to 1 kind of ratio. Look, plenty of land mass on the planet to feed us all plants. I'm sorry to tell people, if we got rid of every cow tomorrow, how much land would that open up?
If we got rid of every person tomorrow.
Yeah, but we're not. We don't advocate for the destruction of human life.
I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying if we think about it.
Yeah, I mean, sure, if there's a random lottery that somehow makes it fair and the rich take this equal part in it, maybe, but that's still less, like, let's save that one for, like, our literal last fucking stand.
God. So yeah, I'm not saying get rid of cows or anything like that.
And I'm personally someone who, I don't know if I could give up red meat. It's like one of the only proteins I eat, and I eat chicken too, but I basically only like eating proteins and overly processed meats. My stepmom gave me one of these Impossible bratwursts a couple weeks ago. Shout out Skim. But I've had it in the freezer, and I'm almost too afraid to try it because I'm such a picky eater. And I've been told it tastes not like the real thing, but it tastes really, really good, and that I'll enjoy it. And she usually has a very good gauge on what I will and won't enjoy.
Gotcha.
But it's sitting here in my freezer for a couple of weeks because I'm too afraid to put it on the grill, try to infuse it with smoke and give it some flavor and try it on a bun.
TikTok.
Because I'm too psychosomatic. I'm in my own head about this. But
right.
But there are people who are, more resistant for probably worse reasons than my own. But what do we do about that? Like, because there's an element of, like, we've been so trained to consume some of this stuff, it's almost, like, unnatural for us to stop eating it in the form of habits or whatever.
Right. No, I think that's right.
But yeah, you said it earlier, you're like, if that's you, that you can give it up fully, like, great on you, appreciate it, but, like, I like the one-day rule, because the one-day rule seems actually implementable.
Yeah, I think it can be different for different people.
Yeah.
So take me. I don't mind getting on a plane because from the ages of 5 to 21, no one in my family owned a car, and I did not own a car. I took public transit everywhere. Oh, I'm getting on a plane. I don't care. I did my service. I did, 15 years, 16 years of just, you don't get more carbon, like, you don't get a footprint that low than just not, So it's just different for different people, and we have to respect that, one, not get dogmatic about it.
Yeah.
Because this is the dirty secret. On the individual level, consuming less of whatever it is good for the planet. Mm-hmm. We have to coordinate, at least in wealthy nations. I think that's another thing that we need to make a distinction. In a place like America, consume a little less, and that's still coming from a place of privilege, but most of the world, there are only so few like really, really wealthy nations with all this like economic activity.
Nations account for this percentage of the population, yet have contributed this much to the atmospheric problems that we have.
Because
most 3 or 10x for certain countries,
right?
10x more polluting than every other country on the earth. That's kind of really bad, and we're leading the way in it.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's America's responsibility, along with Europe, right, and
so would you say
China.
The issue lies with residential or commercial?
That's the thing. I think ultimately
They're
the
symbiotic in a
solutions.
relationship.
Yeah, but does one contribute more than the other?
But we're a consumer culture now, right? So.
And this is where the through line comes back in to get super meta, in that we're all systems at rest in a Nash equilibrium equation that are interacting with each other based on our incentives. But.
Right.
We got plenty of time to get into that.
Dynamic equilibrium is shifted.
But to answer the question, it is a more commercial problem in the sense that we have all of these things happening right now as we're talking all over the world, planes flying, ships, tankers, right? We have to figure out how to decarbonize some of those processes. So Bill Gates brings this up, I think, in his book, which I haven't read yet, but I will, about the production of steel. That is a dirty sort of process.
Yeah.
Lots of pollutants. We figure out how to decarbonize that. How do you make clean steel? It's going to be expensive, but that is, again, where I say, look, we got tax breaks for everything else. Whatever. Figure out a way to make it cheap.
But what about synthetic composite materials made from natural organic matter? It's equally as strong.
Same stuff, right?
These polymers that pollute less potentially.
I'm cool with that too. Steel is a good example because, again, we're talking about an industry that doesn't want to change, right? The construction industry is like, no, we're not. We like steel and we like bolts, gigantic bolts.
My conspiracy theory in that is obviously that the mob is so tied to the construction industry in most of these big cities. But
right. Just in general, figuring out how to decarbonize a lot of these things that are happening at scale.
Yeah.
Right. With cows, very, very interesting kind of in its infancy research. Mm-hmm. There's a specific, was this in National Geographic? I think it was in National Geographic. There's a specific kind of seaweed that if you feed it to cows instead of grass, they literally fart less methane. I know. The researcher who found it, or the farmer who found it, was like, oh. Sometimes you got to get lucky.
Pepto for cows.
Yeah, basically, right? So even trying to limit the amount of pollution from that process, all of these at-large commercial things, that is the bulk of our work. And that's why markets and government need to work together to get that kind of stuff done. On the individual level, by thinking about how to lower your carbon footprint, you're going to do a couple things that are frankly just beneficial to your own life. You're going to consume less. You're going to save more money, right? those are two beautiful things. And also it just gives you that sense of like, look, I'm doing what I can do. All right. Like you don't feel, because I know there are folks in our generation specifically who can feel kind of the cognitive dissonance, right?
And the overwhelmed nature of all the stuff that they have to do.
Exactly. For me, it's riding my bike to the grocery store or not eating meat on a specific day or whatever.
I mean,
just
honestly,
pick a thing. You'll feel good. You'll feel better about yourself. Just like, hey, I did something for the planet today, and it really didn't cost me that much.
And I like your conscious approach to this too, because I think this gets back to like our mental health crisis to some extent, and the idea that mindfulness can really help us with that cognitive dissonance that is making so many people just depressed about everyday life. It's like I'm a cog in the machine, whether I'm an industrial worker or someone sitting in an office as a customer service rep, not really helping people get things done because the way systems are set up, but at the same time, whatever. But being present in that moment and recognizing, hey, it's small, it's little, but it takes all of us taking this little step together. Because clearly, unless we change our behaviors, we can't change the incentives of the game above us.
Exactly.
Which is these large commercial enterprises. In order to force them to change, yes, we need government regulation. Yes, we need that partnership to find solutions to this. But also, we have to stop rewarding companies with our money
100% agree.
For the things that are bad for us overall. And I think the benefits that you laid out about you can save more money, you can feel good about it, and you can get a little exercise and enjoy your time while doing it, depending on how you go about stuff. Like, I think those are the things that we need to be emphasizing, because any way to frame this as a positive to the individual can help to reinforce those behaviors.
I just want to say we got behind the turtles and saving them and got rid of plastic straws really quickly. If we could just do that for a few other things, I think
now
we'd be
I
good.
have to have soggy drinks through my straw, and they last
just
5
don't
minutes.
use a straw.
I never used straws
Just
before
sip
that. I want to
outside of
clarify,
it.
it's a minor inconvenience.
So it might be time to wrap this
I was gonna say let's end here.
Yeah, I think an hour is good to I like the way that wrapped anyways.
Yeah, I think it wrapped naturally. Just real quickly, is it as simple as like don't eat beef, hold in your farts, and like the bacteria better, or is this
better
like a
out
waiting
than
game?
in? I always say.
This is my take, and Kendall, I want you to have the closing take.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
This is in your wheelhouse.
For sure.
Way more, but my take is like the little steps that you can do in your day, as long as you're doing something and you're trying to be mindful about what's the impact of what I'm doing, and do I really need whatever it is that I want to participate in that could be potentially harmful to me, to the environment, to the people who I love and care about. I know that that's a lot to ask, but if you can do that with one thing a week, 2 things a week, and start building on it, it's baby steps. And that's my take.
Yeah. So to answer that question, it is not that simple, but what we are giving you is ways, right? To take those baby steps. I 100% agree with you, to feel better about I am doing something. And if enough people do that and enough people get good at that, then you start to change what's going on above us, right? And
in
so
politics, we call that the cascading effect, because it tumbles into a flywheel that grows and grows and grows into a movement.
So in effect, it is not that simple, but it's a damn good start.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. Well,
Thank you.
we'll catch y'all in the next one.
Go. Fuck yeah, Kendall.